My name is Michael Finley. My Indian name is Malu, given to me by Jeanette Tamantois, a full-blooded Lakes Indian who's still with us today. The location where we're at today, Kettle Falls, known to our people as Swanikt, or translation being noisy water, was a stronghold of the Lakes people. It was an important gathering area where our people came and fish for salmon each year. So we ranged all the way from here all the way up to north of Revelstoke, 40 to 80 miles, depending on who you talk to. Our territory ranged west as far as 15 miles and east from there as far as 40 to 60 miles, all the way down to Addie and up the river up here to Kettle Falls. And again, depending on who you talk to, what ethnographer you talk to, what elder or what family, they may have a different understanding, but that's the general locality of the Lakes people, or the Schneicht people. So the Lakes area was an important area. We were the middle people in some aspects of the Northern Plateau, as it's popularly known as. We came to Kettle Falls each year during the salmon runs, and Kettle Falls represented a big part of who we were as Lakes people. The salmon harvest each year made up a big part of our political and social organization, and it was run by the head salmon chief. And depending on who you talk to, again, some people claim that the last salmon chief was Kikanakwa, who lived during the latter part of the 1800s, mid part of the 1800s. He was in charge of overseeing how the salmon was distributed from each day, and we're told from some of our elders that usually the distribution took place twice a day, usually around noon each day or midday, and in the afternoon or at dusk. And the salmon chief was in charge of deciding when the salmon harvest was going to take place each day, what time it was going to start, and it was run by a strict set of rules governed by him. The men were in charge of harvesting the salmon from the river near the falls. The older men and the young boys would take the salmon from the falls and take them up to the women, who would prepare them up above at different locations, whether it be here on the east side of the river or on the west side of the river. There was curing locations on both sides, and families had their own areas of staying. But we're also told from our elders that tribes from all over the plateau came, from all over the Northwest, whether it be Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and up into Canada, and they all came here for the same purpose. And this area was, as I said, the stronghold of the Lakes people, but also the Colville people were here as well, and they were considered caretakers of Kettle Falls. And we're told that their Indian name was Swaish. So I'm told from my elders also that there was a special ceremony that was held before the harvest would begin each year. The salmon chief would go out on the point here, and he would sing a special song that was passed on from one generation to the next to call the salmon back. He'd hit the rocks together in the water to call the salmon back. The salmon would hear that, and he would come. And that story ties in with the coyote story that says how the salmon are familiar with that sound. And the salmon chief was a big part of the annual harvest here each year, and there were strict rules by which the people had to conduct themselves while here harvesting the salmon each year. The women specifically, they couldn't go into the water above the falls because we thought that the smell would get into the water. When we go down the river, the salmon would smell it and wouldn't come all the way up to Kettle Falls. So they weren't allowed to collect water or get into the water above the falls for that reason. They were only allowed to actually go down to the water when the salmon harvest wasn't taking place. So usually they had a special spot below the falls that they'd go and get the water and then use that for the uses of that they needed for the camps that were located all throughout this area. So, as I stated, the salmon harvest here each year was important, but we did travel throughout our territory. So when the salmon harvest was done each year, a lot of times we'd get in our sturgeon nose canoes and head north, and we'd camp at various locations up north, and we'd use something similar to the plain style teepee, but not all the same. It's quite a bit different. There was a reed mat lodge made up of local things that we used, tule weeds and whatnot. So we went up and down the river all the way up to Revelstoke and above and down and all the way through the Arrow Lakes. We used our entire area, but when the deal was struck in 1846 with the United States and Canada, an imaginary line separated our people, separated our migrational pattern, our migrational direction, so to speak. And it made it more difficult for us to continue to use that pattern that our people had used for so many years. And it only got more difficult as the time went on, especially when the reservations were established. The Indian agents didn't allow the Indians to leave the reservation or to continue their usual and accustomed ways of migrating to their old areas where they do many of their subsistence activities of hunting and fishing and gathering berries and roots and medicinal plants. And that's why our territory was so vast, because those plants and the fish that we'd harvest was located all parts throughout our territory, and so we would use our territory. It wasn't just one area. Although Kettle Falls did make up a big part of our diet, it wasn't just exclusively our only mainstay. We had other areas we went to, and we know we've been here for thousands of years, and it's sometimes contested that, well, you guys haven't been here that long, how do you know? Well, it's not based on just our oral history on how we know we've been here for thousands of years. It's based on scientific fact taken from the ground, based on mainstream America's way of understanding things based on science. So as the reservation system came in, many of our people were allotted right up here on Kelly Hill, and so we remained allotted up there until the north half was taken away, and then the south half was all that the Colville tribe had left. And so, for various reasons, and many of our people started to disperse to Inchlim and other parts of the reservation from Kelly Hill. But Kelly Hill was an interesting area, an interesting era in the lake's history, where many of the lake's people, whether it be the Seymours or the Stones or the Adolphs or Guns, all the other families that lived up in that area.